Good morning. It's Monday, March 9th, 2015. I'm Steve Miller. Today, will South Korea go too far in responding to the attack on Ambassador Lippert? Taiwan hands down 4 death sentences, and Japan takes a cue from Her Majesty's Secret Service. These stories are coming up next on the Asia Brief. By now, you have, of course, heard about the assault on U.S. Ambassador to South Korea, Mark Lippert. That attack took place last Thursday morning as he was attending a breakfast meeting located directly across from the U.S. Embassy here in Seoul. His assailant was Kim Ki-jong, who shouted South and North Korea should be reunified during his attack, which was made by a 10-inch blade. He was able to slash the ambassador's face, giving him an 11-centimeter cut. Required 80 stitches to close. Thankfully, that's pretty much the extent of the ambassador's injuries, and those stitches are set to be removed and the ambassador released from the hospital any day now. Ever since the attack, there's been an overwhelming amount of support for the ambassador and the United States, including one individual who stopped by the ambassador's hospital this past weekend to try and deliver some dog meat. Now, here in South Korea, especially among the elderly population, there's a belief that consuming dog meat after a surgical procedure helps one recover faster. But who is this Mr. Kim? Well, of course, he is a radical and has a long history of very controversial behavior. In fact, in 2010, he threw cement blocks at a Japanese ambassador. He was caught, tried, and convicted of the crime, but received a suspended sentence. Why was that? Well, of course, that was a non-lethal attack, and unfortunately, there are some people here in South Korea that still have a lot of animosity towards Japanese governmental officials, so that may have played into the situation as well. But this case is different. The prosecution is out for blood. They arrested and charged him with attempted murder. It is absolutely the right charge for this crime. Kim could have killed the ambassador. However, some are actually concerned with the status of U.S.-Korean ties and feel that this attack could actually sour them. So they're going to prosecute Kim to the fullest extent of the law. And that means possibly dragging out the national security law, that outdated Cold War-era law that says any kind of support, any kind of positive mention of North Korea is against the law. It is a measure that current President Park Geun-hye says is still needed, and she supports. Some say they're doing this because they fear the U.S.-South Korean relationships are in danger, despite comments to the contrary. But is there a North Korean connection? Not very likely. Kim did visit Kaesong, where the industrial complex is located, in 2006 and 2007 to plant some trees. Following the attack, the DPRK did praise his actions, but that's it. Officials have even said, right now, there's no concrete link between Kim and North Korea. But that does not mean that one can't be created. While I do deplore Kim's actions and feel he absolutely, positively needs to be put away, if the national security law is brought out and used against Kim in this instance, when there is no direct link between him and North Korea, the law is not being used against him. It's being used as an assault on free speech, on free will, and has very dangerous implications for all in South Korea. On May 21st of last year, Chang Chi, a college student, killed 4 and injured 22 others at the Jiangji MRT station. It was a very brutal attack. It was actually caught on video. And because 4 people died, prosecutors could call this a mass murder. Just recently, the new Taipei City District Court handed down their decision and sentenced Chang to 4 death sentences. It was a result of 10 months of effort by the prosecutors. The defense says that punishment is too harsh, that death by knife isn't painful and warrants a lesser penalty. Missing the absolute fact that Chang killed 4, injured 22 in a very brutal attack, and the punishment certainly does fit the crime. On February 10th, Chang admitted to his crime and said that if he had the opportunity to go back in time, he wouldn't do it again. But the families don't buy into that. They say it's a ploy by his lawyers to try and get a less harsh penalty. And this case shows a very interesting dichotomy in how people rise up against a death penalty in one instance, but not another. Once the Bali 9 were sentenced, people condemned the action, but no one's doing that here. Is it because Chang admitted to killing these people, or is it because he's Taiwanese? In my opinion, it's the former. This case specifically outlines why we have capital punishment. Chang brutally killed 4 people, injured 22 others. This is why we have capital punishment. But if we take a look at those Bali 9, the 2 Australians, they physically didn't kill anyone. Blood isn't physically on their hands. What they did was contribute to a system that indirectly killed people. Indonesian President Joko Widodo doesn't necessarily see their actions causing indirect deaths. He sees it as a direct contribution to death. That's why he's pursuing the death penalty for those 2 individuals. But taking this back to the argument of capital punishment, if one opposes the death penalty, one must rise up and champion against it in every instance. Therefore, if you're truly against the Bali 9 being executed, you must also be against Chang being executed. This past Friday, Japan's LDP and Komeito parties sat down and hammered out new rules for operating the Self-Defense Force, or SDF, under the reinterpreted guidelines of Article 9. Now, I've long since said that reinterpreting and changing Article 9 was a very good thing because this is a brave new world. Japan is facing new threats and must evolve to respond to them. They can no longer depend on allies to keep them safe. In fact, under the old interpretation, Japan couldn't use the SDF to rescue citizens abroad. The LDP and Komeito also looked at Article 12, which deals with governing the SDF. Since 1954, the SDF has been under the control of the politicians. Under this new legislation, it will split control between politicians and uniformed personnel within the Defense Ministry. But the big news, and the more interesting news, is what was also announced. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe wanting to create a new foreign intelligence service akin to the MI6. Again, this is absolutely what needs to happen to address these new threats. Currently, there are some 4,400 intelligence personnel split among different organizations, and at times they're not sharing information for fear of crossing bureaucratic lines. That absolutely needs to come to an end. Surely China and South Korea will object to the formation of a new intelligence organization, possibly saying that this is further evidence that Japan is militarizing. But they aren't in charge of guaranteeing Japan's safety and should be paid absolutely no mind. That's what's happening today in Asia, but what are your opinions on today's stories? Be sure to leave a comment, respond via Twitter or on Facebook. Keep up with more news from the region by following Asian News Weekly on Facebook or Twitter. You can also send an email to the show with your questions, your comments, or your feedback. Just drop a note to podcast@asiannewsweekly.net. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with your friends, and while you're at it, subscribe. You can do that on our website, asiannewsweekly.net, or in your favorite podcast application like iTunes or Stitcher. Subscribing is free, and when you do, that next episode is delivered automatically to you. Thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, I'm Steve Miller, reminding you to be true to yourself and always be awesome.